Hi, everybody. This is the lecture for Chapter 10, which focuses on engaging patients and consumers in managing their health. So learning objectives include describing how various digital health tools may be used to promote and enhance engagement, how a patient engagement framework can be useful to healthcare organizations, discuss the purpose and the use of patient engagement tools, identify the challenges associated with incorporating patient-generated health data, and explore some of the new entrants in the patient engagement space. Here's our outline. We're going to start with talking about what digital health is, talk about patient engagement, portals, personal health records, virtual care, including telehealth, patient-generated health data, and the implications for healthcare managers. So digital health and the empowered consumer. So what is digital health? Digital health combines and empowers people and populations to manage health and wellness, augmented by accessible and supportive care teams working with flexible, integrated, interoperable, and digitally enabled care environments. All this that strategically leverages digital tools, technologies, and services to transform care delivery. So the use of health apps, wearables, and patient remote monitoring technology that generates a lot of patient data that may be relevant to managing care and chronic conditions. Incorporating that patient-generated health data in clinical care can empower patients in the clinical decision-making process, including them in the process of understanding their health and what kinds of treatments are ideal for managing their condition. So this is something healthcare executives should understand the common tools, the platforms, and how they can be used in helping to manage health and healthcare. IT strategies and solutions to achieve organizational goals are really important. So understanding how your organization's strategy incorporates this, understanding how your IT strategy also addresses this is really important. So we'll start with a general overview of patient engagement to kind of kick this off. So what is patient engagement? Basically, it's the concept and importance of actively involving patients in the decisions regarding their health, wellness, and care. The four key attributes are personalization, access, commitment, what we call therapeutic alliance. So understanding these four attributes can be incredibly important in formulating a provider strategy for fostering engagement in a way that's impactful. For example, simply providing individuals with access to a portal is not of much value if the patient doesn't have the technology to enable them to access the portal, or if they're uncomfortable using it, or if they fear that their privacy will be negatively impacted. In fact, some studies have shown that differences in access, adoption, use, adherence, and so forth can all contribute to health disparities. The attributes of personalization and access are particularly relevant in ensuring equity and access to all patients. Personalization requires that providers consider individual needs and the expectations of patients. And that may have to do with their ability to understand what they're looking at. If any of you have, logged into your patient portal and pulled up lab results, it's a lot of very confusing abbreviations, terminology. It's hard to understand, even if you can tell what the test is, understanding whether or not the result is significant is definitely an issue with patient understanding, patient knowledge, and a patient's healthcare literacy. Access requires that the patients consider the patient's functional ability, their health literacy, their health status, particularly vulnerable populations such as the elderly or individuals with low income levels or those with limited English proficiency may need additional support. So not only do providers need to be aware of these barriers, but the developers of the tools, so the vendors who create the portals, need to consider those factors, disparities in access, health literacy, usability among different populations. Besides considering the patient's readiness for engagements, providers and care team members also need to be on board. If the provider worries that giving access to patients to view their notes and their results will make them, the providers, more vulnerable to litigation or add to their workload, then they're going to be less likely to do that. Providers can also offer insights into patients' needs and limitations, as well as the workflow issues. There have been studies showing or looking at how care team members' perspectives on the use of a portal and participating providers offering suggestions for just meeting the needs for older patients can affect their engagement. Research found that understanding the care team members' experiences were really important to the integration of the portal into their workflow. So talking with patients about their ability to find information on the portal, talking with patients about how to understand what's on the portal. And of course, that goes towards deepening the therapeutic alliance, the sense that the patient and the provider or the care team are on the same side and are trying to accomplish the same goals. So there's 5 levels to patient engagement. Inform me, so the patient wants to be informed, patient wants to be engaged, empowered, partnered with, and supported. This next slide shows some of the platforms or types of platforms that support those levels of engagement. So we're simply talking about informing the patient. There are e-tools such as, forms that are printable. So the ability to print patient-specific education. Patient has congestive heart failure. The ability to send that patient home with a packet of information that tells them, what their condition means, how to manage their symptoms, how to recognize if their condition is deteriorating, what to do if they feel themselves getting more sick, that kind of thing. And of course, it's got to be material that is appropriate to the patient's level of literacy and healthcare literacy. At the Engage Me level, well, one of the next features is to allow patients to access their own records, right? So it's great to provide education, but then allowing patients to access their records so they can view their lab results, their vital signs, maybe even be able to see how their condition has changed over time. That's not just the patient being the recipient of information, but the patient being able to look and understand what's in their health record. At the empowerment level, we start adding things like patient-generated data. So, if one of the key things that a patient needs to be able to do is manage their weight or monitor their weight, then being able to have the patient generate data that can be aggregated and maybe integrated into the electronic medical record. And even having systems that are then interoperable. If a patient is wearing a continuous glucose monitor, having the information from the CGM be integrated into the medical records so that not only can the patient look at their own glucose level and understand how their diet affects the glucose levels in the bloodstream, but also the provider being able to look at it. They're not going to look at it in real time the way the patient is, but a system can create alerts. So if they start to see that a patient's going out of range or is potentially, getting into a harmful situation, that can create alerts that the care team can reach out and say, we've noticed over the last few days, your glucose levels have gotten out of control. Then there's the next level of partnering. So all of these features, as well as collaborative care. So besides just generating the data, integrating the data into the system, using that to help the patient understand what's happening with their condition, provide, if not real time, but timely information about, adjusting their diet, adjusting their exercise levels, and be forming a true partnership between the care team and the patient. And then the next level is support in the community. So a lot of patients will obviously research and dig into understanding their condition through online resources. There are a lot of online communities that are out there to support patients with various kinds of chronic conditions. Being able to work with that community from the provider standpoint, push additional information, offer recommendations, being available for Q&A, those kinds of things create a situation where the community is supported by the provider. Patient portals, those are the most basic level of engagement tool. Most practices have them. In fact, it is a requirement of Medicare's meaningful use standards that hospitals and clinics have patient portals. This is one of the key elements of why electronic medical records are valuable, that they provide access to patients to look at, understand, and be able to work with their own healthcare data. So patient portal is basically a secure website over which the patients can access their records. A lot of portals allow patients to request or schedule appointments. You can communicate with your provider, sending questions, asking for additional information, request refills on prescriptions, look at test results, like I said, be able to pull up those labs that the provider collected in the last visit and see what the results look like. And most portals have the ability to for patients to pay their bills. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a sample of what a navigation window might look like in a patient portal. So you can see under the section Find Care, scheduling an appointment, seeing who the care team is, maybe even doing an e-visit through the patient portal. Then the ability to ask questions and get answers under communication. Sometimes you need letters. Your employer might need a letter from your healthcare provider just to validate that you've got a health condition that requires some kind of accommodation. Those letters may be, you can request the letters and find the letters under this communication section in the sample menu. And then, of course, all the different aspects of the patient's record, the upcoming visits, results, medications, health summary, a plan of care. So, what is the plan for the next 3 months, next 6 months, next year in terms of what the patient's goals are for managing their health. And then you can see other sections that are all part of that patient portal. This is a table from the textbook. And what this shows is the results of a survey done or published anyway in 2018. And it's the reported online health record functionalities used by individuals among those who are offered and then access their records. So this is patients being able to look at information electronically. And it's not all patients, it's the patients who actually then accessed the record. So you can see 85% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were viewing test results. 25% of patients who accessed their online medical record in this survey were view 62% did one or more health-related tasks. They requested a refill, completed some paperwork, or made appointments. And you can see sort of generally it goes in declining levels from there. 48% communicated with a healthcare provider via secure messaging. So this may be asking questions or asking for information, monitoring health, or using the record for treatment decisions, to update or correct a medical record, to download the medical record, to transmit data. You can see these numbers start to get quite small, less than 15% transmitting data to an outside provider, such as another healthcare provider or a caregiver like a family member, or a service like a home nurse coming in. In the next slide, so this is a survey published in 2021. It's the percent of non-federal acute care hospitals. So these are independent for-profit and not-for-profit hospitals, and the percentage that enabled patient electronic access to health information by type of care setting. So for inpatient care, you can see 97% allowed patients to view health information. 91% of inpatient care settings allowed patients to download health information. 75% of inpatient care settings allowed patients to electronically transmit or send health information. You can see those numbers are pretty similar on the outpatient side. And then in the lower section, this has to do with accessing using patient access functions. So viewing notes, 75% of inpatient and 82% of outpatient care providers allowed patients to view notes. 70%, around 70% of inpatient and outpatient care settings allowed patients to access their health information using some kind of an app. So let's talk a little bit about personal health records. We've introduced the concept previously. The idea is that a personalized health record, it's a system that receives customized content depending on the needs, the values, and the preferences of the patient. In theory, something like this is potentially lifelong, it's comprehensive, and it would support information exchange and portability. So electronic systems that could then send that information to the current provider's EMR system, for example, and receive information from that provider's EMR. And then also the ability for that to be portable, to follow the patient around. Having a personal health record can reduce costs by avoiding unnecessary duplicate tests. Anybody who has had to go back and forth between, primary care provider, specialist, or between multiple specialists has likely experienced, having to do tests multiple times. Oftentimes it's the same test over and over again. And you might not even be aware of it, right? You go into the clinic and they draw your blood for their labs. And unbeknownst to you, they're running some of the same tests that were just run, last week by a different provider. Having a personal health record that tracks those results and being able to share those results with multiple providers can reduce the duplication. A personal health record would also allow for the individual generated health data. So the data you generate from step trackers, food diaries, scales that are networked, blood pressure machines, continuous glucose monitors, all those kinds of mobile technologies that can capture aspects of health and wellness. The reality, however, is that personal health records are not common. There are not vendors with a massive presence in this space. one of the challenges to having a personal health record that really does accomplish all these goals is that, you've got vendors who are very niche in what they're looking at. You've got the vendors that have exercise apps. You've got the vendors who have um, networked weight scales, or blood pressure cuffs. They're invested both in the device, the weight, the scale, excuse me, the scale, or the blood pressure cuff, or the continuous glucose monitor. They have investment in that specific hardware, as well as um, the software or the application technology to receive that information. And they've got um, a customer base, which is their customer base, and there's not a tremendous amount of incentive or reason for the vendors of those particular devices to be able to integrate with larger platforms. The financial incentives just aren't there. The regulatory incentives just aren't there yet. When it comes to virtual care, the thing that, of course, we're most familiar with is in terms of talking about this as telehealth. Obviously, it was a huge part of shifting delivery of care during the pandemic, particularly in the early days from March forward in 2020. Prior to the pandemic, about 8% of consumers had reported having a virtual visit. By the same time, a year later, that number had basically tripled. Even though a lot of health plans had started offering virtual visits, such as MD Live, for example, where you could have a virtual visit with a primary care provider or even a specialist to address specific symptoms. Not many people had done that, but by the time we gotten to the end of year one, a lot more people had. So a telehealth virtual visit can facilitate patient-provider communication, increase access to care, and remove some of those barriers, particularly barriers for patients who have mobility issues or transportation issues, and can allow patients to be more active. One of the significant factors in how well telehealth works is, when you call a service like MD Live, what you get is some random provider who is essentially, sitting in front of their computer doing telehealth visit after telehealth visit. The key requirement is that they're licensed in the state that you're calling from. But when you do a telehealth visit through something like MD Live, you are not working with your provider's office, right? That essentially becomes another separate provider who's doing something for you. They're prescribing antibiotics or eardrops if you have an ear infection. And it's not necessarily, it's usually not somebody who has access to your main medical records. Some providers began scheduling, some providers still do this, will schedule telehealth visit. We have a number of providers at West Clinic that schedule telehealth visits. There's a couple of them that I've worked with who one of the things they do is like sort of all of their in-person visits in the morning and the early afternoon, and then they schedule telehealth visits, in the late afternoon. And usually those are scheduled as part of sort of routine follow-ups. Again, we're talking about patients who are cancer patients predominantly. And so a virtual visit, a telehealth visit, can just make things a lot easier for involving patients who have transportation issues or mobility issues or other kinds of access issues where the job doesn't allow for a lot of time off. Anybody who's taken time off during the day to go to a physician visit, you know that you're basically taking off the morning or the afternoon to have that visit. And if you're in a salaried position, it's not a big deal. If you're working an hourly job, that means you're, taking money out of your own wallet, um, sacrificing part of your workday to have that visit. So telehealth can really be valuable for patients. It can also, help a provider kind of manage the flow of their workday. Um, but typically an ad hoc, an unscheduled telehealth visit, you're going to be using a service like an MD Live where you're getting a random provider. Here's a chart that we will come back to again when we talk about chapter 13. This shows the number of telehealth visits in a given week as a percent of baseline total visits. So this is showing from February through like mid-May, showing how much telehealth visits grew from the baseline. You can see it grew very quickly. You can see into March and April. By mid-April, it had peaked already. Patient remote monitoring. This is where a provider is using technology to connect to patients through a device outside of the care setting. So basically, as a provider, what you do is subscribe to a service, some third-party vendor, and what they do is they provide the patient with whatever device is needed. Typically, it's disease focused, but it may be more general health and wellness. But the patients get some kind of remote monitoring technology. Again, it can be something like a digital scale, blood pressure cuff, some kind of a peak flow meter for measuring, lung capacity, continuous glucose monitor, blood oxygen monitors. But basically, it creates a opportunity to connect the patient with and the data they're generating with the care teams that can provide targeted care. Remote patient monitoring, basically, when a provider enrolls patients in a remote patient monitoring program, as long as they collect like a minimal amount of data over the course of the month, the provider that can then bill the insurance company for that as a service. So remote patient monitoring isn't interactive dialogue between the patients. It's just the patients using devices to collect and send data to the vendor, the third-party vendor, and that vendor will integrate that data into the provider's EMR. They do have to spend some time reviewing and monitoring the data, and they can get paid by the insurance company for doing that. And then if there's an indication that the patient's condition has deteriorated or some kind of intervention is needed, they can do an outreach, ask the patient to come in for a face-to-face, in-office visit, or they can reach out and do a separate telehealth visit. But what this is doing is leveraging the idea of the Internet of Things, the use of sensors and actuators that are embedded in physical objects and then are linked through networks, whether it's wired or wireless. It's the same kind of concept that you see in devices like refrigerators, where you can, on an app on your phone, you can check what do you got in your refrigerator? What do you need to pick up at the grocery store? Or your ability to manage the thermostat in your home through an app on your phone is the same kind of concept, but applied specifically to healthcare. There are a number of health apps that often integrate with wearables. A lot of these are non-regulated, and some of them are well known, things that keep track of your steps, your heart rate. Apple Watches do a lot of this. Help you if you wear your watch to bed. Apple will tell you about your sleep patterns, how well you slept last night. There's a number of fairly common apps. Noom is one that's popular. This is one that's good for like managing a health goal, like weight loss or additional exercise, or maybe even getting better sleep. MyFitnessPal, it's a way that you can keep track of, and add data around your exercise patterns, what type of exercise you had, how, how long you exercise, the intensity of your exercise, and then Lose It is another one. It's a food diary. You can log your weight in there, set a goal for weight loss, and then it allows you to gain insights from whatever you enter in terms of your diet for the day. You can enter your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, enter snacks, and then it'll tell you things about how balanced your diet is. Are you consuming a lot of sugar, consuming a lot of carbs, low on protein? But it can help you to have objective insights into your diet over time. So whatever tool you're looking at, health-related data that's generated or gathered by patients to try to address a health concern can be used to help a provider manage their health, but there's a lot of research that is still needed in terms of how valuable those are, the kind of data is in a clinical setting, and how well it impacts the patient outcomes when we're using patient-generated health data through those kinds of devices and apps. So this is a table that shows, some of the ways in which patient-generated health data can be used. So patients and caregivers, so family members or home health nurses can potentially look at patient-generated health data to help the patient manage their health. For clinicians, we need to be fostering more collaboration between clinicians and app developers to advance those technologies so that we understand how to interpret that data and integrate that data into the systems that clinicians use. For researchers, there needs to be increased funding for studies that investigate the benefits and challenges and best practices around patient-generated health data. Policymakers, there's a need for policymakers to do more to encourage collaboration between the industries creating these apps and wearables and so forth, and the vendors who are creating our electronic health records. And then the need for standards. We've talked about how none of this works if we aren't using common platforms or common standards and have the ability to integrate data from one type of system to another type of system. And then payers and employers. I've seen this in incentives that are sometimes built into health plans. If you have a step tracker, if you download a step tracker and record data for a certain number of days out of the month, your health plan may give you credit towards something. It may be credit towards some kind of reward, like a gift card. I've seen programs where employers, if you join a gym, the health plan will give you $50 a month off of your health plan premium or something like that. So providing incentives for patients to use the devices that generate that health data and then share it with their caregivers. These are all things that are that are really needed for patient-generated health data to fully integrate and become part of the expectation of an integrated care system. So there are some companies that are offering digital health tools, Amazon, Google, Apple. They've been working over the last several years to try and become players in healthcare in various ways. They've kind of dipped in and dipped out in various ways, but all of them, they're approaching it from the perspective of a big data problem. You know, Amazon, Google, Apple, other companies have developed algorithms and AI to help analyze massive amounts of data to try to increase their market share, tailor products to consumer needs. And because healthcare is such a problematic part of our economy, with healthcare costs, you know, continuing to grow year after year, issues like access still being major challenges for us, and even, you know, the lack of improved outcomes over time. These are all sort of being treated as data problems from companies like Amazon, Google, and Apple. And so their approach is, you know, we solve these problems all the time. Let's focus on healthcare. And they've all developed sort of interesting approaches. None of them have really solved the problem yet, though. You know, Apple is collecting tons of data on us, all those of us who are wearing Apple Watches and using them to monitor our steps and our sleep habits. Who knows what the future may hold? You know, maybe Apple will develop its own telehealth platform. You know, maybe there will be some kind of an eye chart, you know, lowercase I chart that you know, healthcare providers will adopt or become a standard for vendors to build on that platform, and then be able to integrate across states, across networks, across providers. I wanted to take a minute to talk about gamification. So gamification is something we're starting to see emerging in the healthcare space in terms of how we engage patients. And that's what this is all about, engaging patients. Gamification is an approach to understanding what incentivizes people. You know, we know that behavior like smoking, sedentary lifestyles, overeating, recreational drug use, and so forth have negative health effects, and those are habits that are hard to break. Gamification is about understanding what it is that motivates people, what incentivizes people, what are the kinds of activities that, you know, give people that kind of thrill of success or that dopamine rush when they're overcoming a challenge, and leveraging that in trying to encourage positive health behaviors. At the bottom of the page, here's a link to a Journal American Medical Association for related to gamification. And there are a number of providers and platforms who have tried to gamify some aspects of healthcare. Houston Methodist partnered with Fitbit in 2014 with the working with the health plan, so the employees, the leadership of Houston Methodist, to create challenges so that, you know, your employer at Methodist, you could see if you could outdo your, you know, your director or your vice president in terms of your step challenges, and then there'd be rewards built into it, you know. But Pokemon Go became enormously popular, especially during the pandemic. You know, it was a way for people to get out, get some exercise, but also, you know, gamifying the experience, right? If you haven't played Pokemon Go, basically it's a video game that is mapped onto the real world. And you have to physically go to places to be able to play with other people or to be able to um, engage with the game in different ways. And there are incentives to get out and play the game. Walk down to the park or walk, to some location downtown where there's a Pokemon gym or there's some kind of reward that gives you additional points in the game. And there's a social aspect to it too. You can trade Pokemon with your friends, show what your collected Pokemon, what's in your Pokemon collection, that sort of thing. There's a product called the Digit Blood Glucose Meter that plugs into a Nintendo DS, and it rewards users who do constant testing by leveling them up to different levels of the game. There's an app called Mind Maze, and it uses devices with like virtual reality goggles to help retrain the brain for stroke victims. One of the more interesting gamification examples is an app called Super Better. This has been around for a number of years, and it's built around setting goals to challenge users to do something that's good for their health, whether it's to recover from an addiction or meet a physical challenge, a fitness challenge. In a lot of cases, it may be to meet like a physical rehab type of a challenge. The creator of Super Better is a woman named Jane McGonigal, and she was a game designer, and she was in an accident and had a traumatic brain injury. And the challenge of recovering from that injury was significant. And so what she did, she basically designed a game for herself, one that would allow her to set goals, take her on quests, reward her for meeting some of those goals. So you'd have like a series of smaller challenges, but then you might have like a big bad or a boss that you have to defeat in order to level up in the game. I'm gonna play a video. Oops. Of Jane McGonigal.
I'm a gamer, so I like to have goals. I like special missions and secret objectives. So here's my special mission for this talk. I'm going to try to increase the lifespan of every single person in this room by 7.5 minutes. Literally, you will live 7.5 minutes longer than you would have otherwise just because you watched this talk. Okay, some of you are looking a little bit skeptical. That's okay, because check it out. I have math to prove that it is possible. And it won't make a lot of sense now. I'll explain it all later. Just pay attention to the number at the bottom, plus 7.68245,837 minutes. That will be my gift to you if I'm successful in my mission. Now, you have a secret mission too. Your mission is to figure out how you want to spend your extra 7.5 minutes. And I think you should do something unusual with them, because these are bonus minutes. You weren't going to have them anyway. Now, because I'm a game designer, you might be thinking to yourself, I know what she wants us to do with those minutes. She wants us to spend them playing games. Now, this is a totally reasonable assumption, given that I have made quite a habit of encouraging people to spend more time playing games. For example, in my first TED Talk, I did propose that we should spend 21 billion hours a week as a planet playing video games. Now, 21 billion hours, it's a lot of time. It's so much time, in fact, that the #1 unsolicited comment that I have heard from people all over the world since I gave that talk is this: Jane, games are great and all, but on your deathbed, are you really going to wish you spent more time playing Angry Birds? This idea is so pervasive that games are a waste of time that we will come to regret that I hear it literally everywhere I go. For example, true story, just a few weeks ago, this cab driver, upon finding out that a friend and I were in town for a game developers conference, turned around and said, and I quote, "I hate games, waste of life. Imagine getting to the end of your life and regretting all that time." Now, I want to take this problem seriously. I mean, I want games to be a force for good in the world. I don't want gamers to regret the time they spent playing, time that I encourage them to spend. So I've been thinking about this question a lot lately. When we're on our deathbeds, will we regret the time we spent playing games? Now, this may surprise you, but it turns out there is actually some scientific research on this question. It's true. Hospice workers, the people who take care of us at the end of our lives, recently issued a report on the most frequently expressed regrets that people say when they are literally on their deathbeds. And that's what I want to share with you today. The top 5 regrets of the dying. Number 1, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number 2, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Number 3, I wish I had let myself be happier. Number 4, I wish I'd had the courage to express my true self. And number 5, I wish I'd lived a life true to my dreams instead of what others expected of me. Now, as far as I know, no one ever told one of the hospice workers, I wish I'd spent more time playing video games. But when I hear these top 5 regrets of the dying, I can't help but hear 5 deep human cravings that games actually help us fulfill. For example, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. For many people, this means I wish I'd spent more time with my family, with my kids when they were growing up. Well, we know that playing games together has tremendous family benefits. A recent study from Brigham Young University's School of Family Life reported that parents who spend more time playing video games with their kids have much stronger real-life relationships with them. I wish I'd stay in touch with my friends. Well, hundreds of millions of people use social games like Farmville or Words with Friends to stay in daily contact with real-life friends and family. A recent study from Michigan University showed that these games are incredibly powerful relationship management tools. They help us stay connected with people in our social network that we would otherwise grow distant from if we weren't playing games together. I wish I'd let myself be happier. Well, here I can't help but think of the groundbreaking clinical trials recently conducted at East Carolina University that showed that online games can outperform pharmaceuticals for treating clinical anxiety and depression. Just 30 minutes of online gameplay a day was enough to create dramatic boosts in mood and long-term increases in happiness. I wish I'd had the courage to express my true self. Well, avatars are a way to express our true selves, our most heroic, idealized version of who we might become. You can see that in this alter ego portrait by Robbie Cooper of a gamer with his avatar. And Stanford University has been doing research for 5 years now to document how playing a game with an idealized avatar changes how we think and act in real life, making us more courageous, more ambitious, more committed to our goals. I wish I'd led a life true to my dreams and not what others expected of me. Are games doing this yet? I'm not sure, so I've left a question mark, a Super Mario question mark. We're gonna come back to this one. But in the
All right, I'm going to stop it there. The point of this is that you can see just through those 5 things that she's gone through, how much games have the potential to engage people in healthy behavior.
meantime, perhaps you're wondering,
So the implication for healthcare managers. As I said at the beginning, it's important to have a vision and a strategy for patient engagement in the health system or the provider organization. What are we going to do? What are the tactics we're going to use? What are the technologies we're going to deploy in order to engage patients? What are the behaviors we're going to encourage on the part of our care team that will enhance the provider-patient relationship and that will help the patient engage with their health issues? We need to have IT staff that understand the patients and the community, including what their needs are, what their preferences are, and their readiness for engagement. Is this an older population that's going to need help with navigating through a patient portal? Or is this a younger population that's looking for the kinds of rewards and incentives that come with playing games, right? To encourage those positive health behaviors. We know that we need to have our vendors and developers actively involved in dealing with this wide range of issues, right? From the challenges of a lack of access to advanced technology, to engage with providers or with their own health information, all the way up to people who are playing games in a virtual reality space. Why can't we allow for a patient who knows how to navigate in a virtual space to use that as a way to engage with their healthcare information, to visualize what's happening with their chronic condition or their illness? And of course, IT staff have to ensure that the clinical and the practice workflows are adapted in a way that support the new mix of virtual and physical care. This is one of the biggest challenges around healthcare technology and healthcare information systems, that we build systems that make sense to an app developer, but don't follow the clinical thought process of the provider or members of the care team and how they are thinking about the patient's condition or engaging with the patient and how things need to be documented and tracked. So that's it for today. Thanks very much for viewing this video. Hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. You're safe wherever you're going, and I will see you the week after. Thanks.